Exposed, how a billionaire transformed the life of a homeless girl thrown in trash by her husband. Lily lay among the refuse, a broken shell of the woman she once was. The stench of rotting food clung to her, and the sharp edges of metal dug deep into her skin as she recalled the brutal fight that had landed her here. Memories of safety of a classroom filled with laughter and the eyes of kids eager to learn faded like whispers in the wind. How could someone like her, once brimming with dreams, now find herself discarded? The pain of betrayal sliced through her more than any physical blow. Her mind raced, struggling against the belief system her family had instilled in her: hard work, resilience, integrity. They would be horrified to witness her current state. Was there truth in their lessons? The indifference of the city loomed above her like the skyscrapers that pierced the heavens, reminding her just how small and invisible she felt. Could she stand up again after being so violently thrown from her husband's grasp, or had she become everything that society scorned, an embodiment of waste? The weight of despair wrapped around her like a heavy cloak, choking the last flickers of hope before she even had a chance to take a breath. As she crawled from the dumpster, the jagged memories of family outings along the riverwalk, sunlight dappling their laughter, haunted her. She clenched her fists in the dirt, determined to shake off the shackles of her past, but uncertainty rumbled like thunder within. Each step through the bustling streets triggered panic and self-doubt. Her heart raced as glances and whispers brushed against her skin like icy fingers. "Who are you now?" echoed in her thoughts like a relentless taunt. Would anyone ever see her as anything but trash? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. It was then that a television screen flickered to life in a nearby cafe, and the world outside faded into the background. The headline read about a billionaire who had once fought his way out of poverty, now seeking to give back to the community. But it wasn't the billionaire's story that caught her attention. It was the moment she appeared smeared in dirt, vulnerable yet fierce, pulsing with desperation. With her story illuminated against the backdrop of hope, she felt an unexpected surge. But who would dare believe in someone like her? As anticipation and disquiet knotted in her gut, Lily wrestled against indecision. What if she reached out? What if someone like James, a beacon of fortune and success, could help her find her foot again? Was she worthy of that? Just as she started to contemplate a possibility, shadows from her past flared to life. Old friends became foes, their judgment casting long, suffocating shadows that whispered she would never amount to anything, reinforcing her cage of doubts. Would she have the strength to not just accept help but to rise and redefine herself? Each glimmer of hope nagged against the weight of her fear. Would ambition be enough to pull her from the depths? The potential was right before her, yet the suffocating anxiety loomed large. And when another traumatic encounter pushed her closer to the abyss, she stood at yet another precipice, her future intertwined with a man who had everything to offer but held the very reminder of what she might lose. As her breaths grew more irregular, she locked her eyes on the flickering newsroom. Her story had merely begun, but how it would unfold remained both a question and a dark possibility. The streets felt chillingly vast as Lily pushed herself forward, gripping the weight of her uncertainty like a lifeline. Each step was a battle against her instincts, which screamed at her to retreat to the safety of the shadows. Yet, internally, a fragile resolve began to form. Could she emerge from the depths of despair? Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in a store window, distorted and fragmented, yet still recognizable. The wildness in her gaze sparked something, an ember of identity that refused to be extinguished. She turned quickly, her nerves coiling tighter as the reality of her situation reasserted itself. She was a wandering ghost in her own city, a familiar stranger. But with each passing moment, the urge to reclaim her narrative became a hurricane. Had she not spent years teaching others, nurturing their potential? Why should her own life be any different? The cafe throbbed with life. Laughter bounced off the walls, and the aroma of fresh coffee wafted through the air, contrasting sharply with the stench that had clung to her. Engineered sounds of normalcy. With a deep breath, Lily pushed through the door, stumbling slightly as the warmth enveloped her. She was met with curious stares, but she straightened herself, channeling the teacher within. She approached the counter, the barista's welcoming smile a stark reminder of the world she longed to re-enter. "A coffee, please," she managed to say, her voice a whisper beneath the clamor. As she held out a crumpled dollar bill, the barista's eyebrows raised, but he didn't say a word, merely reaching for the coffee pot. Lily clutched the cup like a talisman, warming her hands against the porcelain. This moment, ordinary yet profound, marked a small triumph. She'd actively chosen to step away from the shadows. But as she sipped the dark brew, doubt surfaced like bubbles breaking through the surface. What would she do now? Her eyes flicked to the flickering screens above. The billionaire's face loomed large, shadows of his past weaving a tale of resilience and philanthropy. James had clawed his way out of a life that mirrored hers in so many ways. A shiver ran down her spine. Here he was, an angel for so many, yet she felt oddly tethered by fear. What if she reached out and he saw her not as a broken woman, but as someone who could potentially rise again? The tension in her chest constricted at the thought. Would she allow another opportunity to slip estranged as her heart pounded in her ears like drums of war? She needed to confront not just the world but her misconceptions about her worth, the beliefs that kept her captive. Desperately seeking clarity, she snatched a napkin and scribbled a few words: "Help me find my way." A simple note, yet it bore the weight of her plea, a lifeline cast into a turbulent sea. Maybe the unknown wasn't as daunting with hope as its current. Suddenly, a shrill ring broke her thoughts. It was the news anchor, announcing a community event sponsored by James, an open forum where he aimed to connect with people from all walks of life. His voice wrapped around her like a beacon calling through the fog. Could this be her moment? As she put the napkin down, the implications sank steeply. She would need more than just vulnerability to rise. She would also need to confront who she had become in the eyes of others. The stakes were high. Approach the stage and perhaps face a judgment harsher than anything her husband had cast upon her. Or shy away and remain hidden, an option that seemed increasingly intolerable. With newfound determination, Lily finally stood and gathered her things. With every step toward the door, her thoughts sharpened. The way ahead was fraught with risk, but she felt the first inklings of courage rising inside her. She stepped onto the street as the question loomed within her: was she ready to confront her past to seize the future? The time had come for her to face the judgment that awaited. As she made her way toward the event, her pulse quickened. This was not merely about confronting James, it was about challenging the version of herself she had allowed others to define. The heavy weight of transformation pressed down on her, and the answers to her questions teetered tantalizingly close, yet dangerously obscured. But for the first time in a long while, uncertainty transformed into anticipation. What would happen if she faced the crowd? What would James see when she stood before him? The moment of truth was approaching, and she would not shy away from it. The path felt surreal as Lily navigated the bustling streets, the din of late afternoon chatter enveloping her. Each footfall echoed the desire to push forward, yet an instinctual pull urged her back. Confronting James felt both exhilarating and terrifying. It was an unknown territory, not just in the physical sense but within the core of her identity. As she neared the venue, apprehension shifted into a palpable tension that coiled around her chest. What would she say? How could she articulate her need for help, her hunger for validation? The thought of standing in front of a crowd, particularly before someone who had mobilized so many, made her stomach churn. Was she even worthy of this moment? She had spent years teaching others, but the idea of now being the pupil felt jarring. Approaching the entrance, the tangible excitement of the event smacked into her like high tide. She hesitated but forced herself forward, reminding herself of that ember of courage igniting within. As the doors opened, the buzz of conversation grew louder, wrapping around her like an infuriating blur. She felt like an intruder in a space filled with those who seemed whole and thriving, and every fissure in her self-worth ached. Lily took a deep breath to fortify herself. There within the crowd, she spotted James across the room, speaking passionately about overcoming adversity. His words transported her to a clearer time when she had purpose, before the shadows of her past settled like heavy clouds. Watching him, she wrestled with the notion of whether she could muster the same fire he radiated. Lost in his charisma, she felt vulnerable yet inspired, determined. She emerged from her fog of doubt to seek a quieter corner where she could gather her thoughts. As she sat, a woman approached her. "Hey, are you okay?" Her voice was gentle, a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding them. Moments like this reminded Lily of the vulnerability shared among those seeking connection. I'm okay. I'm just trying to gather my thoughts before the words caught in her throat, the enormity of her intent weighing heavily. The woman nodded, sensing the gravity behind her words. "It's brave to confront your fears," the woman said softly. "You deserve to be heard." In that moment, it became clear, she was more than her past, she was a conduit of possibility. She paused to center herself, reflecting deeply on the years spent feeling invisible and stuck. The relationship with her husband had shackled her narrative. Now, she stood on the precipice of claiming her voice. With each renewed breath, a sliver of confidence grew until it blossomed into resolve. She couldn't allow hesitation to rob her of this chance. Thoughts of her past faded momentarily in light of the present. With new clarity, she locked eyes with James, heart racing as he spoke to the crowd. Was she ready? There was no turning back now. The weight of his presence and his accomplishments pushed her forward, and she made the decision to rise. Standing among strangers, she felt their hopes and dreams rush through her. They, too, were seeking direction, looking for someone to understand their battles. As she shuffled toward the stage, doubts plagued her thoughts. But with each step, she reminded herself of the note she had written, "Help me find my way." It transformed into a mantra of sorts, a reminder that honesty could initiate unforeseen connections. With each heartbeat, certainty surged through her veins. She was redefining her story, reclaiming her identity, shedding layers she had long inhabited. As she reached the edge of the platform, she realized she wasn't simply burdening others with her past, she was inviting them to accompany her on the path of rebuilding together. Then her voice rose above the murmurs, steady and resolute. "James. I need help. I need to tell my story." The attention shifted towards her, a palpable silence washing over the crowd. It was no longer about fear, this was her moment of direct confrontation. In the face of judgment and expectation, she stood vulnerable yet powerful, and in that silence enveloping the room, she encountered something remarkable, a shred of hope that radiated from within her, something she hadn't felt in ages. Yet the stakes were high. Would she find solidarity, or would she face a reality far harsher than the judgments she had long feared? The moment of truth was upon her, and nothing now could prepare her for the revelation that awaited. As the silence deepened, James's gaze flickered with surprise, drawing the audience's attention back to Lily. In that critical moment, every shred of doubt that had previously nestled in her mind began to unravel. She no longer felt like the shadow of someone else. Instead, she embodied an undeniable force seeking authenticity. "Who are you?" The question hung in the air, her voice both timid and fierce, demanding the kind of attention that didn't just want to be heard but to resonate. The crowd leaned in, curiosity evident on their faces, shepherded by her vulnerability. With a surge of adrenaline flowing through her veins, she embraced the support wrapped inside their expectation. "I've spent years hiding behind the walls I built, hindrances that only served to bind my potential. All I've wanted was to connect, to understand how to break free from a past that has haunted me." The words spilled forward, raw and unfiltered, as if unearthing a buried treasure long forgotten. James stepped closer, compassion etched across his features, yet the enormity of her admission loomed between them. "What brings you here, Lily?" His voice held an intentional softness, as if trying to coax out the depths of her struggles. I need guidance. I've watched you change lives, and I'm desperate to understand how to elevate my voice without fear." A knot formed in her throat, Each syllable hanging like the weight of her unfulfilled dreams. The crowd shifted, collectively digesting the essence of her plea. It was more than just a request, it was a declaration of independence from the narrative that had smothered her spirit. In the midst of her open-heart proclamation, Lily felt a flicker of something new, a burgeoning self-awareness washing over her. For years, she reduced herself to just a teacher, never acknowledging the wisdom she could draw from her own experiences. It was here, on this stage, amidst strangers, that she unveiled the layers of her identity, slowly piecing herself together like a fragile puzzle. A voice in the back of her mind dared to question what happened next. What if James, the man she idolized, reflected indifference? Or worse, pity? Heart racing, she gripped the edge of the platform, a tangible anchor in a moment that seemed poised to slip away. However, she felt a shift in the atmosphere, an opening, a space for both vulnerability and strength. Encouraged by the encouragement of those around her, she pushed deeper into her narrative. I lost myself in the shadows of a failing marriage. My life wasn't just about me, it had become confined to the person I was expected to be. Her vulnerability cut through the dissonance, metamorphosing into a shared rhythm of healing. James, visibly moved by her candor, raised a hand to quiet the crowd. Your courage is inspiring. But what if you took this moment and turned it into a powerful message? His question reverberated through the silence, igniting both her adrenaline and anxiety. What do you mean? Her curiosity balanced on a knife edge between hope and fear. Each person here wants a glimpse of truth, your truth. They want to know the struggles that built you, not just the successes you share. He looked earnestly at her, his expression encouraging. Imagine how powerful it would be if you stood as a testament to resilience itself. Caught between excitement and trepidation, she pondered the implications of his words. Could she craft her pain into a narrative that resonated beyond the confines of her own experience? Realization struck like a sudden illumination. This wasn't merely about seeking help, but an opportunity to transform her history into something meaningful. Yet the weight of her past felt heavy and complicated, gnawing at her as she considered the potential vulnerability it demanded. Will you help me? She asked, eyes searching his for affirmation. James mirrored her intensity. You have everything within you already. Just remember, we rise, not through silence, but by telling our truths shame-free. The tension grew unbearable as a new possibility ignited within her. What if she could find the clarity she sought, weave her story into a message of empowerment, and ultimately reclaim her narrative? As the room buzzed with potential, she took a deep breath, preparing to reveal more than she'd ever dared. What awaited her was a promise and a peril, a threshold between past pain and future liberation, but that inner conflict surged fiercely, begging the question, would the world be ready for the authenticity she was about to unleash? The path ahead shimmered, but it was fraught with uncertainty. Ignited by the challenge, she felt a deep resolve. This journey might not just change her, but redefine how she saw others, how they faced their derivatives of struggle. With a heart full of uncharted tenacity, she prepared to take the next bold step, and as her gaze lingered in the distance, she sensed there was more to uncover, a truth waiting within that would redefine everything she believed about her own transformation. Would she uncover the depths of her resilience, or would the shadows pull her back into their throes? The exploration was just beginning. Lily stood on the stage, acutely aware of the weight in her chest, a juxtaposition of hope and dread. Every pair of eyes in the audience felt like a spotlight, amplifying her internal battle. Would they embrace her honesty, or would they recoil in discomfort? The stakes felt monumental, yet there was an undeniable yearning to break the chains of silence that had held her captive for so long. James's words echoed in her mind as an unsettling clarity dawned on her. This was not merely about sharing heartache, it was a pivotal moment for transformation, both for herself and possibly for others. She clenched her fists, reminding herself that vulnerability was a tool, not a curse. Each scar she carried marked a lesson learned, a chapter of resilience forged in the fires of experience. I want to tell my story, she said, her voice stronger, clearer, breaking through the clamor of her anxieties. The crowd shifted again, some nodding as if inviting her to continue, sensing the gravity of her resolve. In a quest to be what others expected, I lost the very essence of who I am, she confessed. I allowed my identity to be molded by others, the wife, the teacher, the compliant friend. But all those roles chipped away a part of me, draining my spirit until I was almost unrecognizable. Lily's heartbeat quickened. She had skimmed the edges of her truth before, but now she felt compelled to plunge deeper. My marriage was not just a relationship, it became a prison of expectations. I was thrown into someone else's narrative, drowning in the weight of misplaced loyalty. When the facade crumbled, I stood empty-handed, with the remnants of a life that no longer fit. She observed faces in the crowd, captivated by her words, their expressions a mix of empathy and curiosity. Each nod and subtle lean in her direction fueled her courage. She was not alone in her struggles. Perhaps others had felt similarly trapped, and perhaps her story could resonate with their journey. How do we reclaim our narrative when we've handed it over to someone else? She asked, her voice gaining momentum. For years, I thought self-acceptance was a luxury I couldn't afford. But now I realize, it's the foundation of resilience. The statement hung in the air, powerful and raw. A round of soft applause broke from a few seats in the front, igniting a spark within her. Encouraged, she continued. I never envisioned myself as a victim, but the truth is, I was lost in the shadows of manipulation and fear. It took a breakdown for me to rebuild. Every tear was a brick in my new foundation. It was odd, knitting fragments of pain into purpose. Yet that very alchemy felt transformative, but a flicker of doubt crept back in. What if, in delving too deep, she uncovered parts of herself she wasn't ready to confront? What if facing the full story becomes a burden? The echo in her mind dared to ask. Yet, how could she not explore the depths when that exploration could lead to freedom? As she prepared to delve into the specifics of her struggle, a sense of liberation washed over her. This was more than just her story, it was a collective truth, one that could inspire others to find their voice, their courage. She was ready to fight against repression and reclaim her narrative. Lily paused, glancing at James, searching for assurance. Encouragement mirrored in his eyes propelled her forward. In sharing this, I hope to empower others to shatter their own walls. We need to turn our whispers into roars because our stories matter. And as she began to thread specific experiences into her narrative, the anxieties, the confrontations, the small victories, she felt the room shift. The audience was no longer just a sea of faces, they were fellow travelers on a road of discovery. Each word she articulated became a stepping stone closer to self-acceptance, crafting a new reality, one where authenticity reigned supreme. Yet the dynamic tension continued to grow. What would be the next step in her journey toward embracing the entirety of her identity? Lily's thoughts raced as she stood, poised at the precipice, ready to leap into the raw reality of her existence. The crowd hushed, collectively holding their breath for her next revelation. In that moment, she realized the real journey was just beginning, and the next chapter would require confronting not just past fears, but also the unknown terrain of self-love. What awaited her could redefine everything she knew about her strength and potential. Would she rise to meet it, or would the daunting shadows once again threaten to pull her under? The answer awaited her, just beyond the stage. Lily took a steadying breath, centering herself as she faced the audience once more. The room was alive with palpable anticipation, a stark contrast to the emptiness she had felt just months ago. This was her moment to rewrite her own history, and the stakes were not just about her narrative, they were entwined with the souls in the room, waiting and watching. The air crackled with shared possibility. As she sought the right words, she felt an unsettling struggle within. Would digging deeper into her experiences expose her to the very trauma she wished to break free from, or would it ultimately grant her access to the freedom she yearned for? It was a fine line, one she was ready to traverse. She recalled the darkness that surrounded her in her marriage, the moments where her voice felt suffocated beneath the weight of someone else's expectations. Let me tell you about a night that changed everything for me, she began, her voice unwavering. It was during one of our arguments. My husband had told me I was incapable, that my ambitions were mere fantasies. I remember feeling something snap inside me, like a fragile thread fraying under pressure. The audience listened intently, drawn closer into her world. That night, I packed a small bag and drove aimlessly, tears blurring my vision. I ended up parked at the edge of a lake, where the stillness enveloped me. It was there that I confronted the depths of my despair, a profound loneliness that seemed insurmountable. I started questioning everything. Who was I, really? Was my self-worth so entwined with someone else's approval that I lost sight of my aspirations? Her words hung in the air, drifting toward the audience as if calling out to each person to reflect upon their own lives, their own sacrifices. In their faces, she recognized a mirror of her past, a shared burden that connected them through their individual stories. Out of that darkness emerged a lesson, a fierce determination ignited by the realization that my happiness could no longer be dictated by anyone else. She paused, letting the weight of that truth sink in. I discovered a dormant strength, a fire I didn't know I had. Each tear revealed my fierce resolve to come back for myself. With renewed confidence, Lily continued to weave vivid experiences, uncovering the small yet radical shifts that had colored her road to rediscovery. She spoke of instances when she learned to assert herself, when she started prioritizing her passions, carving out time to write, paint, and reflect, activities that had grounded her sense of self before anyone else had a claim to define her. I began to realize my worth didn't stem from being the perfect wife or teacher. It was about being true to myself, nurturing my spirit, and allowing joy to blossom. But that realization was not without difficulties. Adopting self-love felt selfish at times, battling the lingering whispers of guilt that I somehow owed everyone my compliance. Lily could feel the tears pooling in her eyes. She blinked them away, refusing to let the vulnerability twist into fear. Instead, she let it enhance her strength. Letting go of guilt doesn't diminish love for others, it amplifies love for self. It creates space within me to love authentically, without fear. As she spoke, a familiar flicker of doubt nudged at her consciousness. Was she truly ready to embrace the full spectrum of her identity? Would she continue to confront her past without crumbling beneath its weight? The silence in the room became a cocoon, wrapping around her in warm support. She knew the battle against her old self wasn't just about reclaiming her narrative but about truly understanding her worth. And yet, she said finally, a deep breath pivoting her energy, this journey holds challenges. What happens when shadows return to haunt you, when the past threatens to pull you back? That, my friends, is where my real fight lies. The anticipation hung thick in the air, a shroud of mystery waiting to be unfurled. The southern wind from an open window caressed her face, and she felt a surge. She was on the brink of something monumental, both terrifying and exhilarating. What awaited her on this ongoing journey? What confrontations and revelations lingered just beyond, ready to push her even further into the depths of self-discovery? The answers resided in the uncharted spaces of her heart, daring her to seek them out. With a deep breath, Lily felt the weight of the audience's gaze urging her onward. The pulsing energy morphed into a strong, silent agreement, fueling her courage. She stood at a precipice, knowing well that to back down was to dishonor the struggles already faced. "What shadows do I mean?" she asked, her voice penetrating the loaded silence. One of the biggest ghosts I wrestled with was the voice of that husband echoing in my mind, undermining every step I took toward rejuvenation. "You can't do that. You're not enough." Each word was a pinprick, a reminder that the past's grip was not easily relinquished. I knew it wouldn't come down to erasing those voices, it would require integrating them into the narrative of who I was becoming. Drawing from the depths of her experience, she shared further. "The moment I left, it wasn't just walking away from him, it was a transformation of how I saw myself. Yet as I stepped into this newfound freedom, I felt an old tendency creeping back, the compulsion to second-guess my choices and aspirations. I began to notice those moments when I would shrink back from opportunities or challenge because I feared the echo of that voice would be waiting for me. Reflecting on these layers, clarity transformed the chaos within. Breaking free meant confronting those daunting questions: what if I failed? What if that voice was right? But what if I soared? With that thought, the audience leaned in, the collective breathing almost synchronized under the weight of her self-discovery. As she delved deeper, her body tingled with anticipation. I had to find a way to reframe my past, otherwise, would remain tethered to a narrative that no longer served me. I began reading intensely about women who had faced adversity and redefined themselves. Their stories became my compass. A pause allowed the weight of her words to resonate. But knowledge alone isn't enough. Knowing I had the power to rewrite my narrative didn't erase the fear. I often questioned whether I had the bravery to act on those insights. Her voice quavered for a moment, vulnerability unveiling itself, and the honesty flowed unfiltered. One day, after yet another sleepless night haunted by doubt, I made a decision I would seek out a mentor, someone with experience, someone whose presence felt strong enough to guide me through uncertainty. Lily cast her gaze over the audience, searching their eyes. That day, stepping into that coffee shop to meet her felt monumental. My stomach churned, but with each step toward the table, I reaffirmed my worth to myself. I asked for help, I sought guidance. And that one simple act of vulnerability felt like lifting a heavy shroud. As she unfolded the richness of her advice-seeking journey, the audience engaged with her path, a tapestry woven of struggle, wisdom, and transformation. Through each session, I learned to augment my skills, the very ones I had initially thought were beyond me. I discovered I had a knack for engaging storytelling, and unexpected talent that became key to my growth. Their breaths punctuated her pauses, as if riding the waves of her enlightenment. But forging these connections demanded something deeper from me. I faced relational vulnerabilities. The old fears of being judged or not measuring up crept back, and I had to choose between allowing those shadows to consume me or stepping into the light. Every word ignited a flicker of energy, yet beneath it all brewed a tempest of uncertainty. The path wasn't smooth. There were moments of missteps, feelings of inadequacy, and doubts that stalked me at every turn. I found myself standing at crossroads, unable to decide whether to lean into that growth or grab onto the comforting but confining cloak of my past. Lily's heart raced at the precipice of self-discovery. Here I stand today, balancing between embracing my growth and confronting the echoes that haunt me. What comes next? How do I learn to live more authentically in this evolving identity? The deepening silence was both comforting and heavy, laden with anticipation and spectral challenges. The journey had ignited her passion, yet lingering questions poised for entry. What shadows would re-emerge to challenge her resolve? And would she embrace the risks of bold living, even when doubt threatened to overshadow her gains? The uncertainty loomed, pulling her deeper into the unknown, beckoning her to leap once more into the vast, uncharted terrain of her true self. Lily left the stage, her heart still pounding as adrenaline and vulnerability coursed through her. It was a release, yet the whispers of her past clung to her, urging her to remember the comfort of obscurity. A room full of expectant faces had borne witness to her growth, yet doubt darted like a shadow in the corners of her mind. As she exited, she felt the rush of fresh air collide with the weight of her emotions. What now? She asked herself. The audience's affirmation still echoed, but with each step away from the spotlight, its intensity dimmed. Was she really ready to embrace this new narrative she had crafted? It was one thing to deliver words intended to inspire, another to live them out. Later that evening, as she sat alone at her kitchen table, her mentor's words returned to her: face your fears, don't fight them. Understand why they exist. She pinched the bridge of her nose, grappling with the haunting memories, the self-doubt, the echoes of criticism. The intimidation of public speaking had transformed into a vibrant thrill, yet the true test awaited her at home. In the silence, after several minutes of internal wrestling, she decided to confront the shadows head-on. They were more than memories, they were lessons disguised as burdens. Processing them was a daunting yet necessary evolution. It was time to stop running from the past. Fueled by a newfound determination, she turned on her laptop and began writing. Opening a blank document felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to leap, terrifying yet exhilarating. Words poured out of her, the tapping of keys punctuating the silence of her apartment. She wrote about her journey to finding her voice, relaying the bottomless pit of despair she once inhabited. Every sentence became a stitch in her narrative, reinforcing her resolve. But the deeper she delved, the more she discovered another layer of fear lurking beneath her words, the fear of judgment. What if this raw truth, embraced by the rhetoric of empowerment, led to backlash? What if her vulnerability was seen as weakness? With a tentative breath, she hit save and closed her laptop. The sense of accomplishment was overshadowed by the weight of impending decisions. She knew she should share her writings with her mentor before venturing further, but a sense of dread held her back. Would her mentor support her ambitions, or would their relationship pivot on her new boldness? The next day, clarity dawned with the sun, illuminating both her path and doubts. She called her mentor, voice wavering but resolute. "Can we meet? I want to discuss something important." The coffee shop felt oddly familiar and intimidating as she took her usual seat. Minutes stretched into eternity, and the timid anticipation rose in her chest again, a reminder of inadequacies that had long clung to her. But the moment her mentor walked in, the familiar fear transformed into something much sharper: expectation. "I've been reflecting on our sessions," she began as her mentor settled into the seat across from her. "And I think it's time for me to take a more active role in sharing my story, but I'm terrified." "Terrified means you're on the brink of growth," her mentor replied, and those words cascaded through Lily, igniting a spark of courage. "What is your plan?" There it was, the opportunity to shape her future, to elevate her narrative into something greater than herself. She visualized the words forming around her fears, huddling together into something powerful and transformative. "I want to put all of this together, write something impactful," she admitted. As she laid out her aspirations, the rush of vulnerability filled her, and for the first time, it felt electrifying rather than suffocating. The mere act of sharing her ambition with her mentor fortified her resolve. "I want to speak not just about overcoming, but about the beauty in the messiness of living." Her mentor gazed thoughtfully, nodding slowly. "Then embrace it. But don't just stop here. What steps do you envision taking next?" Those words cracked open a door that had felt sealed. What if she organized a workshop, engaging storytelling as a tool for empowerment? Although exhilarating, it also terrified her. Confrontation loomed once again, a deep dive into the uncertainties she had previously avoided. Lily's pulse quickened. "I want to host a workshop, a safe space for others to share, to transform." "You'll need a plan," her mentor urged, and in that moment, the gears began to turn in her mind. Fueled by the prospect of the workshop, uncertainty faded, giving way to a newfound purpose. Who would attend? How would she structure it? As the conversation deepened, Lily realized her past could evolve into a catalyst for others. She would not just reclaim her story but redefine it, bringing forth the shadows into the light. However, looming questions rattled her confidence. What if she was met with resistance from those still entrenched in their fears? What shadows of doubt would she have to confront next? The stakes had risen. The journey was far from over, and every layer of the unfamiliar landscape promised both opportunity and risk. Now, she would have to prepare for a confrontation not only with her own fears but with the shadows of others, making her ready to step into her purpose fully. What awaited her as she embraced this path of authenticity and challenge? Would she find allies, or would she confront obstacles that would threaten to derail her newfound mission? Lily spent the next few days grappling with the details of her workshop. Ideas flowed, but they felt abstract, hovering just beyond her grasp. Each time she tried to structure her thoughts, a familiar phantom of self-doubt encroached upon her, whispering that her vision would crumble under scrutiny. Instead of merely planning, she needed to ground her aspirations in palpable reality. On a brisk Saturday morning, she returned to the coffee shop where she had met her mentor, but this time, she needed solitude. Seated at a corner table, she pulled out her notebook and deliberately wrote down her thoughts on paper, where they could no longer flutter away. Her pen glided with urgency, jotting down everything from potential session topics to possible venues. With each scribble, fear transformed into tangible schemes, but as she filled the pages, the specter of judgment loomed again, heavy and oppressive. What if her workshop attracted only critique rather than support? Would others dismiss her experiences as irrelevant or exaggerated? The notion paralyzed her momentarily, and she set her pen down, staring vacantly at the half-empty coffee cup before her. Lily? The voice broke her reverie, pulling her gaze upward. It was a former colleague, someone who used to be part of her life, now an echo of a path she desperately hoped she had moved beyond. What are you doing here? Caught off guard, Lily hesitated. Just brainstorming some ideas for a project, she stammered, the weight of her insecurities making her voice tremble. What kind of project? The colleague pressed, curiosity lighting their eyes, the instinct to retreat kicked in. Nothing, just a workshop I'm considering. Interesting, her colleague replied, raising an eyebrow as if assessing the validity of her ambition. That simple scrutiny struck a nerve. The urge to defend herself against a hurricane of doubt rushed through her. Yet, pulling back didn't feel like an option either. Swallowing her fear, she plunged forward. It's actually a workshop for storytelling. A safe space for people to share their experiences, to find strength in vulnerability. Her colleague's expression shifted from skepticism to intrigue. That sounds empowering, actually. Have you thought about what makes your story impactful? Questions erupted through her mind, slicing the air between them. It was a moment of reckoning. I want people to understand that vulnerability doesn't equate to weakness. That strength can arise from confronting fears, not avoiding them. The honesty in her voice surprised even her. It was liberating. But as the conversation drew back to surface-level small talk, Lily felt the pull of retreat again. Escape felt safer than continuance. Yet a seed of determination had sprouted within her, a desire to confront those fears directly, rather than shy away. Leaving the coffee shop, she walked purposefully down the street, the sun warm against her skin, invigorating her resolve. It occurred to her that organizing a workshop was just one part of a greater puzzle. She needed to live as a reflection of her mission, not just preach it. With clarity sharpening her insight, she decided to practice what she planned to teach. Perhaps sharing her own narrative with a small group first would help refine her approach. That evening, she reached out to a few close friends and invited them over. I want to share something important with you all, she told them over snacks and drinks, feeling a mix of anticipation and dread. Once they settled in, she opened her heart, recounting her journey, the stumbles, the fears, the triumphs that had woven her present with threads of resilience. She watched their expressions shift, absorbing the vulnerabilities she laid bare, their faces reflecting a cocktail of empathy and intrigue. As she shared, the room melded into a melting pot of acceptance and understanding. They began to reciprocate, each person revealing their own stories, their own shadows. In that moment, Lily recognized the transformative power of shared experiences. Their words felt like a bridge, connecting their narratives even amid different circumstances. Eager curiosity ignited a spark, inspiring her to take the next step forward, to carve out the workshop idea into an actual event. Yet, somewhere within this growth, a looming sensation of anxiety thrummed beneath the surface. The workshop would be publicly shared. How many others would respond as her friends did? What mockery would surface from undermining voices? That night, as she lay in bed, restless thoughts swirled like a tempest in her mind. Transformation was unfolding, she could feel it, but it came with risks she had to reconcile. How prepared was she to face not just her fears but also the potential criticism of a wider audience? Would she emerge empowered, or would exposure invite backlash that would pierce her newfound confidence? The uncertainty loomed large, but one thing was sure, it was time to embrace the challenge fully, and there it was, a turning point. Would she step onto that stage of her life fully, aware of the repercussions? Or would fear continue to shape her narrative, sidelining her aspiration to inspire? The moment had approached to confront not just the darkness within, but the shadows of those who would watch. Ready or not, the time to leap was coming. As the day of the workshop approached, Lily's excitement mingled with a storm of apprehension. This was not merely an event, it was the embodiment of everything she had fought to reclaim: a voice, a purpose, an identity. The past few weeks had ignited a transformation, both internal and external. She had crafted a narrative that had guided her through the shadows, fundamentally reshaping her relationship with herself. Now, here was the culmination of that journey: a workshop titled Reclaim Your Voice, Finding Strength in Vulnerability. All that was left was to face the truth of whether she could lead others through the very pathway she had just begun to traverse. Every detail had been meticulously organized: inviting guests, crafting prompts, and preparing reflections. But the most significant step was still ahead: confronting her fears in front of an audience, many of whom were strangers. The night before, she recorded a video message to share with her growing online community, voicing her hopes and fears. Each word seemed charged with the weight of her story. Her transformation had not just occurred in the shadows but had taken root in the light of connection. She shared her experiences not simply as tales of overcoming but as invitations for others to join in the reclamation of their narratives. Moments before the workshop began, she stood at the venue's entrance, a buzz of energy vibrating in the air. The room was filled with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Each face reflected a shared curiosity, waiting to hear what she had to say. The enormity of her journey flooded back the moments of vulnerability, the self-doubt, and ultimately, the courage that pushed her to stand before them today. With a deep breath, Lily stepped into the light. The attendees quieted down, and for a moment, time seemed to pause. Her heart raced as she exchanged glances with some familiar yet hesitant faces. But this time, rather than retreat, she felt empowered. "Thank you all for being here," she began, voice steady. "I stand here as a testament to the resilience that resides within each of us. I've faced the depths of despair, I've felt invisible, and I've wrestled with demons that told me I was unworthy. But today, I will share my journey not just in words but through all of us willing to acknowledge our stories." The stirrings of shared emotion began to ripple through the audience. It was a moment charged with vulnerability, underscored by the symphony of humanity, the connection that happens when pain and strength interlace. Today, as she navigated through topics of authenticity and vulnerability, Lily witnessed the audience lean in, their expressions filled with understanding and engagement. They were not merely spectators, they became active participants in a communal exploration of growth. It was a dance and exchange that revealed the strength hidden behind their struggles. After Lily concluded her narrative, she invited everyone to share their own stories, their experiences, and their challenges. The room transformed into a haven, a safe space where voices intertwined, resonating with the support and acceptance each person craved. Her fears ebbed away, they were now reframing into something far greater than herself. In the immediate aftermath of the workshop, a wave of gratitude washed over her. The attendees lingered, sharing their reflections and weaving connections inspired by their authenticity. "I never thought I could talk about my own struggles, but you created a space where I felt seen," one participant confessed. The sentiment echoed abundantly, one after the other, validating the purpose of the workshop. That evening, Lily returned home, and for the first time in a long while, her heart felt light. She had enacted a full-circle transformation. Embracing her vulnerability had allowed her to empower others on their journeys. The ache of her past still existed, yet it now served as a pillar, one that fortified her resolve rather than hindered it. Recognizing this, Lily poured her thoughts into her journal. "Today, I learned that by reclaiming my voice, I also cultivated a community of hope. There is profound strength not only in vulnerability but in the shared human experience." In this evolving narrative of individuality, she stood proudly as a robust anchor amidst the waves of change. No longer a victim of her past but a guide for those navigating similar paths, Lily had achieved something monumental. The reclamation of her story had opened doors. What began as a whisper transformed into a resonating call for others to tackle their fears head-on, hands outstretched, hearts ablaze. It was her triumph, one born not from escaping shadows but from stepping unafraid into the light. So let this be your moment. Join Lily's journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire growth and resilience. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support powerful narratives like this one. Comment below with your reactions and theories about this conclusion. Your voice matters, and please, share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful transformation. Don't wait even one more second to spread this message. True fans of personal overcoming stories know that this community thrives with your support.